If you also want to talk about some dumb things, we can move on from the Z Fold 2.
Time to get into Facebook and Intel and horrible projects going wrong. So anyway, let's go forward here with Facebook, and we should also talk about Oculus in this one once we're done with this first section here. But,
yeah, we can mention that real quick. I don't think that's something we should go into too much, just because it's kind of.
Yeah, no, I mean it's been talked about a lot, but it's just kind of like
So, Facebook put out this letter to developers that utilize their audience network revenue service, which is essentially the way that you can put Facebook's advertising service in your custom-made apps. So if you don't want to use Google's ads or you don't want to use some other companies, you can use Facebook. I don't know why you would want to use them over Google, but you can. Facebook has warned that iOS 14 could cause a 50% or more revenue drop for the audience network revenue. And the reason for that is because iOS 14, this is the whole reason for the 50% or more drop, iOS 14 makes users opt in to being tracked across apps.
Oh my. People actually have to say yes.
Their entire, for their audience network, their entire, ad revenue is so dependent on tracking you across applications that simply having to have users say, yes, that is okay, they expect so many people not to do it that it will cause a 50% drop. And they're not talking about just for iOS, even though this only affects iOS, which means they probably are expecting almost nobody to authorize being tracked.
Yeah, and it's funny because, most people wouldn't. And we have Apple introducing a privacy feature, and Facebook's like, please don't do it. Please keep your stuff less private so that we can make money. And I don't know, it's just like, it's ridiculous to me because it's I don't even know how to articulate what I'm trying to say, but Facebook makes their money off of non-consensual tracking.
Yes. And one of the most interesting things for me when I read through all of this news about Facebook expecting the revenue drop.
Yeah.
And I think part of why it's so high, because I don't actually think it would be a 50% plus drop from just the tracking.
Yeah.
Normally. But Facebook in its apps is not even going to request the IDFA, which is the unique device identifier that tracks you across applications. And so that means that Facebook is no longer going to be gathering user data that its ad network can use even for its third-party apps. It's not even asking for it, which tells you that Facebook is willing to lose money and lose third-party developers money so that consumers don't know that it was tracking across apps. Obviously some people know because we talk about it.
Right, but that's not the general consumer. And when iOS makes you aware of something like that, right? Some of the permissions in iOS where it's hey, do you want this app to track your location all the time? That's stuff people didn't used to think about until they're asked about it,
Yeah. And so it's the fact that Facebook is so concerned with how it would affect their brand that they're not going to request it at all. They're not even saying, the users who are okay with it in exchange for better, more targeted ads, they don't even have that choice now.
Yeah. Which is just,
what?
It's just weird. Yeah, I don't, because in some, not with Facebook, but in some instances, I actually prefer targeted ads. I turned off targeted ads on, Reddit, for example. I'm going to turn them back on because they make no sense.
I turned them off on Google, and I'm thinking about turning them back on just because YouTube keeps, normally people will say, when you have, a porn or, a dating app ad, it's people will say, normally, that's because you look into that stuff. I have targeted ads turned off, and since I've done that, YouTube has started giving me what is essentially porn ads.
Dude, targeted ads are just weird.
YouTube demonetizes the whole platform because of something a single creator does. But yet somehow advertisers are fine with the fact that sometimes YouTube serves up porn ads?
Dude, it's ridiculous.
What?
Yeah, I don't... that whole thing, I can't understand any of it, and it's so targeted ads. The point is, can be a good thing,
Yeah.
and not having the ability for that is actually kind of gonna suck because, like, it's honestly like it's kind of gross to not have targeted ads. Like, looking through stuff and, like, getting ads for, like, baby wipes or something weird that's like I have zero interest in is just kind of annoying.
Yeah. Well, and it's like for me, like, so I want some degree of targeted ads, but I want it to just mostly be like it should be better targeted at the content I'm currently looking at, I think is where the focus needs
Yes.
to shift when you don't have like data gathering turned on. So
Right.
for example, we'll go back to the YouTube example. What YouTube should be doing is like YouTube should have 3 options. No targeting at all. Normal, full, we take all advantage of your Google data targeting. And targeting only based on the data being used to load that current page. So what I'm thinking would be ideal in this scenario is like the middle ground would be, okay, YouTube is already using my data of my watching for like recommending videos.
Right.
So sometimes I'll go on YouTube and it'll recommend primarily gaming videos based on whatever it decides. Sometimes it'll recommend primarily tech videos. Well, what would be the ideal middle ground option for me and where I would enable this and it would allow YouTube to make some more revenue, me to get a better ad experience, and me to be more likely to click on ads, but not me to utilize all of my data, would be YouTube to like essentially flag what is the majority of videos for this category. If in my case it's tech or in my case it's gaming that are mostly being loaded, it can know just the category of videos and then load tech ads or load gaming
Yeah.
ads.
Mm-hmm.
Or for people that it's recommending beauty videos to, it can recommend beauty products. And it doesn't have to be targeted at the specific things they look at because they're turned off the full-on targeting, but it can be more specific than an ad where literally the image that YouTube is showing is like a woman like hand brine.
Yeah, where
Like,
that's
why is that
not
a
okay
YouTube
on
ad at
YouTube
all?
itself. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because like people can lie about their age on YouTube. Like, why is that? Like, YouTube is a mainstream product. Why is
Yeah,
that
so that's
showing
like
up?
not okay. And like to that extent, like having more targeted ads and actually doing a good job categorically, like I think needs to be improved industry wide because like I wouldn't feel guilty to click on an ad if that ad made sense for me to click on. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like I would be okay with clicking on that ad and giving some ad revenue to YouTube, Google, some news site, whatever it is. But it's when those ads are either intrusive or just don't make any sense, where then it's just in the way. Then it's just annoying, and
Yeah.
I don't want to
Yeah,
deal with it.
like for me, what I don't want is I don't want ads showing up that happen to just coincide with a message I sent you on Hangouts. What I don't want is an ad showing
Yeah.
up based on something that I emailed to someone on Gmail. What I do want is if I'm looking at ads about or if I'm looking at like videos about PC hardware, that is general enough that PC hardware ads would be fine and reasonable.
Yes.
And so there should be some middle ground where it's like based on recommendation category, they can give you a semi-targeted ad.
Or you can be Facebook, where it coincidentally advertises Land Rovers to you because you talked to somebody about it in person.
Yeah.
Like, I had that straight happen, and I'm like, what? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I'm so
Facebook bugs
glad
me.
too that iOS is doing the whole thing where if the camera is on at all, it shows an indicator. If the
Yes.
mic is on at all, because there is situations where like so with Instagram for example, somebody had caught where what would happen, and this has already been fixed, even though iOS 14 is not fully out yet, but thankfully they fixed it right away once they got caught. But one thing that would happen is if you activated the camera, even if it was like the accidental like swipe over where the camera initiated, like if you swipe over a little bit
Yeah.
and it pulls up the camera and then you close it, there were situations where the camera or the microphone would stay active after you've left it, but you were still in the app. So you could be on Instagram,
And it's just
accidentally open the
listening to you.
camera, close it, and it could still be active. Now, data researchers didn't even have time before they fixed it to look into if it was actually sending audio to Facebook servers. My
Yeah.
assumption would be that it's not doing that much on on iOS, but it probably was doing it more on Android.
And might still be.
Yeah, because Android doesn't have that type of indicator across the system.
Yeah, like usually it's an after indicator. Like, by the way, this app accessed your mic 10 minutes ago. And it's like, okay.
Yeah, that doesn't help if you accidentally swiped over on Instagram because you know it accessed it because you accidentally opened it.
Yeah, exactly. And like even then, and the thing with Android is it gives you since it's not a little bubble or dot, it's an actual notification. It's really annoying because it'll be like, by the way, this app used your microphone, and I'm like, yes, the phone used my microphone because I was calling somebody, you know. So it just makes more sense to have a persistent indicator. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Facebook
though.
is saying that they're looking at potentially very significant revenue drops to their advertiser network. And the other thing that I thought was interesting, Facebook is only talking about how this affects third-party developers. It seems like my assumption as to what they're doing is they are presenting what they theorize is the worst case scenario for any given app developer.
Yes.
And they are using that to essentially try and get app developers to pressure Apple to not implement a major consumer privacy feature.
It's like ammo. Yeah, they're trying to use it as ammo.
Yeah.
And that bothers me.
If this was just about Facebook trying to save as much revenue as they could and give developers a heads up, Facebook would be requesting that identifier for people that are okay with it, or even just people that don't read the prompts and just say yes, because plenty of people would still be doing that.
Oh yeah, that's a common practice, you know? Oh, accept our privacy policy. Yeah, no problem. Of course I'll accept your privacy policy.
Yeah. Now, in this case, thankfully, the way that Apple's doing it, it's not it's a dedicated prompt for this.
Yeah,
but
right.
Still,
but I mean,
plenty of
still
people would just hit yes.
Stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, there have been times where I've accidentally clicked OK, and I'm usually pretty great about this, but I've accidentally clicked OK on a location prompt from Apple, without thinking about it, and it's like, oh, whoops.
Yeah, and I love that iOS 14 is adding the general location rather than precise location as well as an option.
That's such a great feature. So you have general location or precise location while using the app, or precise location once, or precise location all the time. Yeah. That's such a granular set of options. And they're just pop-ups as you're working with stuff, so it's not something you have to think about very much.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just such an interesting thing to see Facebook essentially just not even try and request potential user data because they would have to tell users that they're requesting it.
Yeah, it's really weird. And Facebook, on the note of doing shady shit, is also now going to be requiring all Oculus users to use their Facebook account to sign into Oculus and get VR games and stuff like that and play online. So now remember though, don't worry, you can still use it without a Facebook account in offline mode. So, can't do anything with it.
No, I will say this. If you don't want to give Facebook money anyway because you're not buying from the Oculus store and you're already buying all of your games from Steam, you're fine.
Okay, that's true. That's a good point.
And I will say,
but you still can't play games online and stuff as much. Well, actually, through Steam, you probably still could, huh?
No, you can.
Yeah,
you just don't use the Oculus software. So for the people that already, realistically, I think most of the people that are really concerned about this, probably didn't buy many games from the Facebook or Oculus store anyway.
This is true, yeah.
The big
so it's
downside,
not a big deal for them.
Yeah, the big downside is that one advantage to Oculus over something like an Index is that Oculus does fund some pretty good games getting developed.
More so than Valve does.
Yeah, Valve doesn't have any exclusives for their Index.
Yeah.
And so you're actually losing out on being able to play some legitimately good games.
Because you don't want to link your IRL profile to it. Because again, this means that it falls under some of Facebook's terms of service. And one of those terms of service is you're not technically allowed to have a Facebook without your real name. It's supposed to be real name only. So that means you have to attach your real name to your VR porn game.
Yeah.
Like, but I mean, like, it's
just buy your VR porn games on the Steam store and then close the Oculus app. You're fine.
then you're good to go. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's just a weird thing for them to be asking. And like Palmer Luckey was questioned about it because he publicly said many times, like, "Hey, that's never going to happen." And when asked about it, he was basically like, "Yeah, I mean, I was told in writing that was never going to happen, and I'm sorry to everybody, you know, because they changed whatever policy was put in place originally for that, and it's stupid." So
yeah.
that was a fun little Facebook topic there. Facebook's always failing and doing horrible things though. So
yeah, one example I want to give though of like a legitimately cool game that I'm sad is an Oculus exclusive.
Yeah.
Respawn Entertainment is making a VR Medal of Honor game.
Yeah,
that
I would
looks
love to
like
play it.
Great. It looks, I mean, graphically it doesn't look great because it's a VR game.
VR, yeah.
But it looks like it's. I mean, I don't think it's going to be as quality as Half-Life Alyx.
Yeah.
But it looks pretty close. It looks like what you would expect
like
from a AAA VR game.
Like interactive and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And the other really cool thing about it is, you know, when you look at the developers from Respawn who came from Infinity Ward, before they were at Infinity Ward and Activision, the games they made before that were Medal of Honor. So you have the original Medal of Honor team back on, or some of them, back on Medal of Honor, which is already fucking awesome.
Yeah, Medal of Honor has been a fantastic series. I remember liking it more than COD in the past.
Yeah. So you have like you have developers returning to their original franchise in a completely new scenario for them of making it in VR. And unfortunately, it has to be Oculus exclusive.
It makes me sad. It genuinely makes me sad.
Yeah.
But you know, speaking of things that make me sad and companies that don't do a bad job, Intel still can't keep up with IBM. So IBM is finally releasing their 7nm parts. So sad for you, Intel. Now, again, these are made by Samsung, so that is an important factor to keep in mind. They're not manufactured by IBM in terms of the silicon. However, they are designed by IBM. And so it's called the Power 10 CPUs. This is just kind of a brief thing here because these are specifically for data center. So like we're talking chips that are like designed for multi-petabyte memory workloads and stuff like that. So like we're talking really insane setups. But it's really interesting to see them. They have PCIe 5.0, so we're actually seeing some chips come out with that, which is interesting. So Intel's still on 3.0 for those that didn't know. And 16 cores, but only 15 enabled on the die, which is also odd. But just thought I'd mention that there, that, you know, IBM technically does have that now, and Intel still doesn't have 10nm really completely ready to go yet. I mean, we have it coming out in Xeons hopefully soon. They have launch dates. We'll see if they make them and how hard they are to get. But on another set of Intel doing horrible, they really fucked up a new supercomputer here. This one was pretty unfortunate. So the new Aurora US-based supercomputer that was over $500 million.
That's all? That's not that much.
Oh yeah, no big deal. Yeah, not a problem at all. So it's the first system in the United States that's supposed to be reaching exascale compute, beating China to it actually. So really just an insanely beast of a supercomputer, an insane beast of supercomputer. And it's going to be delayed because Intel can't manufacture the chips fast enough. Now, keep in mind, this supercomputer was very advertised about how proud that they are in both Intel and I can't remember what university or company is actually helping with the machine, but like the government and Intel,
the U.S. Department of Energy.
Yes, U.S. Department of Energy, all talking about how awesome it is. Look, we have U.S. engineers on U.S. soil manufacturing U.S. based silicon for this machine, which is like, okay, I mean, yeah, it's cool. And now Intel's probably going to be outsourcing some of that, if not a lot of it, to TSMC.
Yep.
And also to keep in mind, this delay is not like this is a delay of a supercomputer for military missile testing or something like that. This is a supercomputer designed to like help humanity's biggest problems, like do simulations based on the human brain and brain injury to figure out if we can potentially solve that brain injury like Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. So Intel is causing a delay on a machine that's supposed to help us, and also is probably going to have it made not in the U.S. when that was one of the big selling points about it in terms of like news articles.
Yeah.
Of, you know, the U.S. reaching exascale compute, except it's kind of Taiwan, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
and
it's
then
just
the other
Intel.
thing too is that like, sorry, this was
There you go.
announced back in like March of last year.
Yeah, yeah. So like, it's like
Yeah.
they're
They had
already like they're missing all their marks, man.
Yeah. This was like a 2-year project. So it's like you'd think that they would have been able to like plan ahead as far as how they were going to build manufacturing capacity for this.
Yeah, but instead it sounds like they just Intel, you know, for a long time being such the king, so to speak, of a lot of computing, was, you know, capable of just not caring because they were the only option, and so nobody would really do anything about it, and it's like, it's just sad, like like it's genuinely to an extent actually sad to see that happening, you know, and it's just, I don't know what to say, and it's you know, there's a lot of people that are being disappointed in Intel, and it's not just on the standpoint from us, like the nerds and stuff like that, as well as the projects, like this MSN article. I just pulled this MSN article back up about how Intel stock is running out of investor goodwill at a frightening speed, and I'm just really quickly going to read this one of the blurbs from this MSN article. In some ways, Intel is like a sleepy person who stubs his toe while getting up in the middle of the night. A normal person would learn from this jarring, unwelcome experience and either remembers where the leg of the dresser is or makes an adjustment in movement. After all, it hurt, but if the sleeper doesn't make the right adjustment and stubs that tender toe again and again, well, it sure isn't the furniture's fault. Like, that analogy was fantastic because the point is that Intel is now just known for being like, oh, we're going to have a product out next year, and it might not be for 5 years. You cannot trust a single release date from that company anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they just make empty promises now. That's just like, that's what they do. That's what their investors do. They just make empty promises all the time. Or not investors, they're C-level people. Just, oh, we'll just make a promise. We don't know if we can actually make that or not. We don't necessarily really have that great of a plan to make it. And, you know, I feel like there's been people arguing about it for a long time as AMD has done better, and we've also seen other manufacturers start to do stuff, where people are like, well, yeah, but Intel's still huge. Intel still has so much market share, you know. Oh, Intel, you know, still has so much money to throw at the problem. Well, are they throwing enough money at it? Because it certainly doesn't seem like it. They can't get anything done.
Yeah.
And it's just unfortunate because they were a leader for a while, even back when there was competition, you know, before they were just being a monopoly and behaving mischievously. They were a leader, so it just kind of makes me sad. But
Yeah, and like this affects, you know, potentially like jobs in our area because like there's an
yes.
Intel factory in the Portland metro area.
Yeah. So it's like, sucks. Very much so sucks. It's bad for economy in general, but
yeah.
So the next topic I wanted to talk about, this is one that I stuck in here, and it's tech related, but I'm not going to go into hefty detail about it. Certainly you can look at the source link.
Hefty.
Hefty. So I'm gonna, you can go into the source links if you want, obviously, to read more detail about this, but a company called NewScale got safety certification for their new their new nuclear reactor design, and they got this certification from the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is really interesting. So, and it was actually kind of cool because it was developed largely thanks to Oregon State University. So, to put it simply, I'm not gonna like sit here and explain all the details. Take a nuclear reactor, make it 76 feet tall and 15 feet wide, and it is like a pod, like a cylinder pod, and it's a self-contained unit that is entirely passively cooled, as well as the control rods are passively inserted, so in the event of a power outage, earthquake, whatever it may be, water flow lacking or something like that, they will not melt down or overheat. They're extraordinarily safe, and they're capable of doing about 50 megawatts per pod, as I'm calling it. Now the turbine system for actually creating the power is not contained in them. These are just the steam generators, and it is based still on uranium for the time being. Maybe there'll be a thorium version. That's just me speculating someday. But I just thought it was really interesting to see like real development of better nuclear technology for power needs for the future. I think it's good, because um, we have this exponential growth in power requirements, and despite how interesting and great some of the other renewables can be, I don't think a lot of them are really long-term solutions, because they can't scale to that exponential growth that we're trying to do. As well as developing this kind of stuff, of course, is going to help for the future of going to Mars and stuff where it may be harder to do, uh, you know, um, other forms of renewable energy there.
Yeah, because you have different specific issues. So like with solar, which is probably going to be the first thing utilized on Mars, you
Mm-hmm.
run into the issue of having to constantly clean the solar panels because of all of the dust that would get on the panels.
Yeah, it's so dusty there.
Yeah, so you either have to like build an automated system for cleaning, which is realistically what they probably should do because we're going to send the supplies before we would send people.
Yeah, yeah.
And so if you're already sending, like theoretically in this scenario, you'd be sending some kind of robotic system to set up the solar panels.
Right.
So realistically, you should be sending something to clean it anyway. But that's still like a lot of stuff that you have to do just to get solar panels up and running. Is send,
Mm-hmm.
whereas like eventually, if they reach the point where they can like send certain aspects of the reactor, and then theoretically, while like something like the the SpaceX method of getting to Mars probably wouldn't utilize nuclear propulsion. Nuclear propulsion is already used for some things, and so theoretically, if you could use a situation where you have like a nuclear propulsion rocket bring you from once you've already gotten into orbit to Mars, and then you can
Yeah.
take that nuclear reactor and move parts of it into a small reactor on Mars, that would be like a really smart and efficient way to handle that.
It'd be interesting, and so if you can build these and obviously by the time that happens, these would have many iterations. But just this new style of being like a pod form factor, if you can make these space travel shippable, right? Then you can you build the rest of the plant, but just with space for these actual reactors to be inserted. It's really starting to sound almost like very future sci-fi. Like
Yeah, the concern with would be mostly just like safely handling the nuclear on a ship or the
mm-hmm.
uranium on a ship. Whereas I think that's one advantage. Another advantage of thorium would be I feel like it'd be easier to transport thorium to Mars to start up reactors once we have thorium reactor tech good enough we can build
Right,
it on
right.
Mars.
I guess what I was getting at was like actually building the reactor on Earth with the uranium already in it, but just not in a powered down, locked down state, and shipping that.
Yeah.
Um, but either way, I mean, it's still useful to have the modular design too, because for like Mars, I'm really liking that example. Say you're planning to build a plant there that has like 8 of these, right? You ship 2 extra, and then if one
Yeah.
breaks down, you don't have that 50 megawatt loss of power for that long, a couple of days or however long it may end up taking. And there's not a ton of detail yet, but then you can put a replacement unit in there, or you build one at Mars, that's like designed to be scalable, right? Or that's kind of the idea with this too, at least from what I gathered is, you start in a city that's maybe growing, right? And you start with something that can house 20 of them, but you only put 10 reactors. I'm making numbers up there, and then you add more as you need more power in that city area that's growing.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not wasting power, and that also will help us put up more smaller reactors, so we're not having to deal with the power loss through the lines of wires. Because like right now, you put up these big reactors, it's like, well, we got to run wires incredibly long distances for the amount of power that a reactor can put out to be useful.
Yeah.
So.
There was some other cool nuclear announcements recently.
Oh yeah.
Something that Bill Gates had funded have announced a system essentially for a sodium cooled fast reactor that also handles energy storage in addition within the system. It uses molten salt for storage, and it's designed for the molten salt would be used for like shorter term storage. It's not like you'd store it for days at a time.
Yeah.
But where essentially um, the reactor generates the power, and it essentially retains it in the form of heat in the molten salt. and then it can discharge that heat as power. And so the idea with this is that it is used like in combination with clean energy tech. So you would use it in combination with solar or wind, and then it can discharge the energy either during peak times when the current build out of the solar and wind would not be generating enough power, or it can discharge at night when there's less power if there's a spike, that type of thing.
Yeah, right.
And so the idea is that it can put out 345 megawatts of electrical power indefinitely. And then with the storage system, it can do like 500 megawatts for 5.5 hours. So while it's only a 345-watt system, it would store the energy, keep it heated, and then if it needed to jump up to 500 megawatts for up to 5.5 hours straight, it could.
Can I just jump in here and just say that it's remarkable that we understand this stuff as a society? Like, it's just, I mean, you could make the argument we don't because people are so scared of it, but also it's remarkable that the human race has figured out this like, we're talking about, using uranium or thorium to liquefy salt as a storage system for energy. Yeah. Like, it's just remarkable. It really is. I love it.
I mean, it really comes down to our ability to record knowledge, because like even if we as individuals could, even if like another species could think as well as us in general, if they didn't have a way to give that knowledge to the next generation through language and through writing,
we
would never compound on itself to reach this point.
Yeah. It's just amazing. We need to start a nuclear podcast.
I want to get much smarter before I start doing that.
Well, I mean, the point would be that we're learning as we go. We talk about the news and try to start to understand it. I mean, that's how all the like SpaceX YouTube channels got started, right? But
yeah, but that's a little different than nuclear.
As this is true, but still, it'd be an interesting way to educate people on nuclear. That's what I'll do. I'll invite my brother, see if he can start a podcast with me.
Yeah, you should just have him start a podcast.
Yeah, like him and I could just do a podcast about it, and I'll let him talk.
It's just him talking, but you take the credit.
Well, I'll just sit there and, ask questions, try and understand it. Yeah. Regurgitate it in a simplified way if necessary. But, yeah, so I thought that was interesting, though. A lot of interesting nuclear stuff happening, and I think there's a certain person we have to thank for it named Andrew Yang, so...
I mean, like, a lot of this stuff would already be on the way, but what we do need to thank Yang for is the fact, in my opinion, that the Democratic Party, for the first time in 48 years, has put nuclear on their platform.
Yes, big deal.
Yeah, that's a pretty big change, because, like, while, like, Cory Booker was also in favor of nuclear, he wasn't actively pushing it. He had mentioned that he does agree that it is part of the solution.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like Yang made it a core part of his climate plan. He even fought against criticism because he understands the science and the necessity of it.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing is regarding the climate issues is it's like we're always fighting over what the next solution is, but like we've known how to produce clean, relatively clean power for like 60 years.
Yeah, and if we were to be putting in the effort for thorium, it would solve so many of the concerns about nuclear anyway.
Yes, well, and also just Generation 3 reactors, which we're putting up in the U.S. now. Finally, they create less waste, and that waste can then be vitrified and stuff. But thorium is better in general, just because it's a order of 100 times less radioactive, if I recall correctly. Although that's variable. You can make uranium less reactive, more reactive, that kind of stuff. But it's just like people get scared of it, right? You have the Fukushima incident, right? Like that was still a Generation 2 reactor. Like I want to be clear, that reactor is the same design that was used for the Chernobyl reactors, which obviously that failed because of cheap parts and human failure. But the point is, like, that's how old that design was. Generation 3 is just starting to become a thing. So it's interesting. And now we have these like modular nuclear reactors, which is just like that's so cool.
Yeah.
So